Welcome to today's powerful discussion where Pastor Gino Jennings fearlessly addresses the moral character of American leadership with boldness and conviction. In a thought-provoking and provocative statement, Pastor Jennings shines a light on the hypocrisy and moral failings he attributes to Donald Trump's administration. Through this sermon, he challenges believers and citizens alike to uphold higher standards of leadership rooted in biblical principles, faith, truth, and accountability. Pastor Jennings is known for his fearless approach to the truth, and in this message, he does not shy away from controversy. He directly responds to a letter from a staunch Trump supporter who took offense at his criticism of the former president. The supporter even went so far as to refer to Trump as their Lord and Savior, an alarming statement that Pastor Jennings swiftly and unequivocally rebukes. He asserts that true believers should not pledge blind allegiance to any nation or human leader but only to God. Many Americans, he argues, are willing to accept mere crumbs from their political leaders, small gestures that appeal to certain values, while ignoring the larger moral and ethical shortcomings of those in power. He critiques both Democrats and Republicans for their pattern of tokenism, keeping the people pacified while maintaining structures that prioritize wealth and privilege over justice and righteousness. This, he warns, leads to a passive population that fails to demand true change. Pastor Jennings highlights how divisiveness plagued the Trump presidency, emphasizing that a leader who incites chaos, hatred, and division cannot be in alignment with biblical principles. He points to Trump's inflammatory rhetoric, which often resulted in riots, violence, and increased national tension. According to Proverbs, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. Jennings argues that during Trump's tenure, America experienced more mourning than rejoicing. In response to his critics, Jennings reaffirms that his message is not about partisan politics but about holding all leaders accountable to biblical truth. He warns against the dangers of idolizing politicians and mistaking their performative gestures for genuine righteousness. He specifically calls out Trump's use of religious symbols, such as holding up a Bible for a photo opportunity, likening it to how white supremacist groups have historically misused Christian imagery to justify oppression. The sermon also touches on issues of race and class, as Jennings critiques the structures of power that continue to privilege the wealthy elite while neglecting the needs of the poor and marginalized. He exposes the hypocrisy of those who decry illegal immigration while simultaneously benefiting from the labor of undocumented workers. He asserts that many political leaders are more concerned with protecting their financial interests than serving the people they claim to represent. Furthermore, Pastor Jennings discusses the role of true faith and the cost of discipleship. He emphasizes that following God requires courage and unwavering commitment. He calls on believers to stand firm in their faith, even in the face of persecution, threats, or societal opposition. The biblical figures of old, from the apostles to the prophets, faced imprisonment and even death for standing up for righteousness. Jennings challenges modern Christians to consider whether they are truly willing to take a stand for God. He also critiques the broader church for aligning itself with politicians instead of remaining steadfast in its spiritual mission. Many churches, he argues, are more interested in securing political favor than in upholding the gospel. He rejects the notion that any political leader, including Trump, should be given special treatment in the house of God. Instead, he insists that all must be measured against the same biblical standards. Jennings does acknowledge certain positive decisions made by Trump, such as policies that recognize the existence of only two genders and regulations preventing biological males from competing in female sports. However, he maintains that these isolated policies do not absolve Trump or any leader of their broader moral failures. He warns against the temptation to overlook significant flaws simply because a leader takes a stance on certain cultural issues. Throughout the sermon, Jennings urges his listeners to examine the fruits of a leader's actions. He points to the biblical teaching that a good tree bears good fruit, while a corrupt tree bears evil fruit. He reminds believers that character, humility, and a commitment to justice should be the true measures of leadership. He calls on Christians to resist being swayed by propaganda and to seek out leaders who genuinely strive for righteousness. Jennings also addresses the larger issue of political deception and how easily people can be misled by charismatic figures. He warns against blindly following leaders who exploit religious sentiments for political gain. He cites historical examples where religion has been weaponized to manipulate the masses, urging his audience to remain vigilant and discerning. Moreover, he emphasizes the importance of accountability, stressing that no leader, whether Democrat or Republican, should be above moral scrutiny. He encourages believers to challenge corruption wherever it exists and to demand better from those in positions of authority. He reminds his audience that faith in God should always take precedence over loyalty to any political figure. As he nears the conclusion of his sermon, Pastor Jennings delivers a resounding call to action. He urges his audience to seek leaders who demonstrate genuine integrity, humility, and a commitment to justice. He warns against the deception of political propaganda and encourages believers to remain vigilant in discerning truth from falsehood. He challenges his listeners to educate themselves, to question what they hear from politicians and the media, and to stand firm in their faith despite societal pressures. At its heart, this sermon is a resounding call to action for all who profess faith in God. Challenges believers to reject hypocrisy, stand firm in righteousness, and demand integrity from those in power. His message is not merely a critique of Trump but a broader condemnation of political corruption and moral compromise that has infiltrated leadership at all levels. Jennings does not shy away from speaking hard truths regardless of the backlash. His commitment to delivering an uncompromising message reflects his deep conviction that faith should never be weaponized for personal or political gain. For too long, many leaders have exploited religious beliefs to secure votes and maintain influence while failing to uphold the values they claim to represent. Jennings' sermon exposes this deception and urges Christians to see beyond empty rhetoric, calling them to hold their leaders accountable. True faith demands action, not just words. It requires discernment, courage, and an unwavering commitment to justice and righteousness. Despite criticism, Jennings remains undeterred. He understands that preaching the truth comes with a cost, but he refuses to dilute his message for the sake of acceptance. His passion is rooted in a desire to awaken believers to their responsibility, not just to follow Christ in word, but in deed. His sermon serves as both a warning and a challenge. Will Christians continue to tolerate the misuse of faith for political advantage, or will they stand up and demand better? If you are tired of leaders who manipulate faith for their own agendas, if you long for teaching that is unfiltered and biblically sound, this message is for you. It is a call to rise above complacency, to reject spiritual compromise, and to embrace a faith that is bold, authentic, and transformative. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more thought-provoking messages that challenge the status quo and inspire believers to a higher standard of faith and leadership. Truth is not always comfortable, but it is necessary. Let's walk in it together.